So after a loss to the English, the All Blacks looking to bounce back up against Wales this weekend, and Scott Robertson, some massive decisions needing to be made. Does he go experimental? Does he go with a similar side that did face up against England? These are all questions that will soon be answered, but in this video, I will be trying my absolute best to predict Scott Robertson's team here. Now, I do feel this is the hardest lineup to predict of the whole year, because in the November internationals back in 2024, New Zealand did lose to France, and then they had their match the week after up against the Italians, where rather than experimentation, they went with full strength. So whether or not that is the same here up against Wales at the Principality, we will have to wait and see. But jumping into it, my predictive front row for Scott Robertson: number 1, Tamaiti Williams; number 2, Samisoni Taukei'aho; and number 3, Vasilio Tosi. 3 men who have been predominantly making their way off the bench for the All Blacks. I do think that Ethan de Groot, Fletcher Null, as well as Cody Taylor, they are due a spell. Now, Razor may look at it as one more big match for those players before the end of the year, so perhaps he will go with that same front row, but it looked like de Groot was carrying a bit of an injury in that English Test match, and overall these 3 men off of the bench have brought quite a nice bit of impact for the All Blacks as a whole. Moving on to the locking duo, this is where I believe we will be seeing Scott Barrett as that number 4 and also as the captain for this matchup. Number 5, returning from sickness, which did leave him out for the game up against the English, I believe Scott Robertson will be going with Fabian Holland. There is a chance that we do see Fabian Holland rested for this matchup, just because if he still isn't quite 100%, there's no point risking him in this game up against the Welsh. So we could see Sam Darry or perhaps Josh Lord in that starting lineup, but I do think there is a pretty high chance that with the limited minutes we've seen from Scott Barrett, that he will be playing in this contest as well. In the loose forwards, this is where I believe we will see a big switch. Now, Ardie Savea has played a huge amount of minutes throughout 2025, and in this type of match up against the Welsh, I don't think you need to risk him. He's done enough throughout the season. He has shown what he can do in that number 7 jersey as well as in the number 8 jersey a little bit earlier on in the year. But this time, the loose forward trio: number 6, Wallace Satiti; number 7, Duplessis Karefi; and then number 8, Peter Larkai. Now, straight away, I do think people would look at that and go, Scott Robertson's not going to choose it because they aren't big enough as a loose forward trio. But Duplessis Karefi, he has shown throughout his career that even though he doesn't have the biggest size about him, he can certainly pack a punch. Partnering with Wallace Satiti and Peter Larkai, that is a dangerous loose forward trio, and it also gives Savea that little bit of a break while also giving the younger players in the squad a bit more of a chance. Now, Devin Flanders, he was called into the squad. We've seen Christian Leo Willie training with the team for a couple of weeks. Summer Penny Finau's gone back to New Zealand. Luke Jacobson, he was out with a concussion, so there are a few switches that could be made in this loose forward trio, but overall, I think we're going to see roughly the same as we saw last week. They've also got the option of Simon Parker to bulk up that loose forward trio that little bit more, and perhaps Satiti still makes his way off of the bench for this matchup. But now moving on to the back line, this is where I believe it gets a little bit more tricky, because in the 4-pack you can get away with making a couple little switches here and there, and it doesn't affect the side too much as a whole. It's these backs for New Zealand that have been getting the most criticism throughout this November internationals period, and I believe we're going to see a couple changes here up against the Welsh. For 9 and 10, number 9, Cortez Ratama, and number 10, Ruben Love. Now, whether or not Scott Robertson is willing to put Ruben Love in the starting lineup has been debatable. Whether he's willing to play him as a 10 rather than a 15, well, that one is debatable too, but I believe we will see at least one change across 9 and 10. We saw Roygaard limping off the field last week up against England. Now, in the injury update provided by the All Blacks, the only player that was mentioned was Tavita Mafaleo, so that would slightly insinuate that Cam Roygaard would be fine for this contest, and perhaps you do partner him with Ruben Love, give the youngster that little bit more confidence. But Ratama, he hasn't really started a huge amount of games. It is only normally when someone is injured that he does get that chance, and in this case, if Cam Roygaard is nursing an injury, would make perfect sense that Ratama does go in. Ruben Love as the 10. There is a chance that we see the Ratama and Damian McKenzie 19 combination. It is very hard to get a read on Scott Robertson at the moment, so honestly, a lot of these could be completely wrong, but it would be nice to see some sort of change to seem like they're at least trying to go in the right direction at the end of the calendar year. In the midfield combination, number 12, Anton Lienert-Brown. So that kind of goes back on what I've just said, because you're going back to a veteran player who a lot of people feel hasn't had his best season, but it did seem like Quinn Tupai was also nursing a little bit of an injury in that last game up against the English. He's taken some huge shots in that number 12 jersey, so perhaps since Lienert-Brown made his way off the bench, only got himself very brief minutes up against England, they would look at starting him in this type of contest. Number 13, Leicester Fainanuku. They may go Proctor, they may go Ioane, but I do think that Leicester Fainanuku, with the return of Caleb Clark, it means that if you want Leicester in the starting lineup, he is more than likely their outside centre choice. Now, last time that he played outside centre, he did miss a huge amount of tackles, which I do think is where having Anton Lienert-Brown as the 12 may actually favour New Zealand just a little bit. Quinn Tupai missing the most tackles out of any All Black in the match up against the English with 3. So Anton Lienert-Brown, he has lost a little bit of a spring in his step on attack, but defensively, he does still do a lot of things. Right into the back three, number 11. This is where I'm predicting Caleb Clark will be starting out on the left. Number 14, a return of a player that we haven't seen in quite some time, Sevu Reece. And then number 15, once again sticking with Will Jordan. Now, I could see Will Jordan going out to the right wing with Ruben Love slotting in at 15 and Damian McKenzie as that number 10. But due to Beauden Barrett having a bit of a leg injury, I also do think he will be completely rested for this matchup, which does mean you still want that first 5 cover off of your bench, and that is what McKenzie does offer. But for Sevu Reece, a lot of people have got him falling further and further down their selection order, so he needs a big match here. He won't be going up against Josh Adams, as we did see Adams has received a suspension from his red card up against the Japanese, but he's still dangerous enough on attack, Sevu Reece. And I do think that him getting put in the same category as Rieko Ioane is slightly incorrect. Sevu can still have a good game every once in a while for the All Blacks. It's just whether or not he gets the other side of things right out there on the park, such as the work under the high ball and also just that general play. Know how strong you can be on attack. Defensively, pretty solid too. So we'll see whether or not Sevu Reece gets a run and at this match. But moving on to the bench, this is where, after we did hear about Tavita Mafeleo's injury, it could bring a debut for George Dyer. But for myself, I've gone George Bell, George Bower, and Fletcher Neal. You can't have 3 Georges as the front row making their way off of the bench. Although I would have to say, first time in history, surely, that the 3 front row replacements have all had the same first name. But George Bell, he's had very limited opportunity for the All Blacks. And by that, I mean he hasn't played throughout this year. He did come into the squad for Brodie McAllister, and since then we haven't seen him get the opportunity. Number 17, George Bower. I think that you rest Ethan de Groot in this contest, and I believe Razor will do the same. And then Fletcher Neal, just to add that Crusaders cohesion for the later stages of the match. Number 19, Josh Lord. And then number 20, Ardie Savia. I think that Razor will find a way of putting Savia somewhere in this match up against the Welsh. Now, 20 could be the perfect opportunity for Devon Flanders to get his international debut. He has been going outstandingly for the New Zealand 15 as well as throughout Super Rugby and the NPC, but I do think they'll have that security of Savia off of the bench. This is where you could also give Parker the opportunity, seeing as he is versatile and can play all 3 of the loose forward roles. But Savia, that also gives you a vice captain off of the bench, and I've got another one just a little bit later in this lineup as well. Number 21, Finlay Christie. If Cam Roigard is not 100%, there is absolutely no point playing him in this matchup. Yes, there is a victory on the line for New Zealand, but they should still be capable enough without Cam Roigard in the team. Although at times we have seen a lack of attack as soon as Roigard makes his way off of the field. Number 22, Rieko Ioane. So my vice captains in this scenario would be Ardie Savia and also Rieko. Scott Barrett captaining the side in the starting lineup. And you could also look at someone like an Anton Lienert-Brown as a vice captain as well if needed. I do know that the All Blacks love having at least 2 or 3 in the mix there, but I do think that Rieko Ioane, due to the lack of minutes that he's had throughout November, Scott Robertson may look to find some way of putting him into the side. And then number 23, a man who has saved the All Blacks bacon many times off of the bench, Damian McKenzie. He could be starting in this matchup. Like I mentioned, it is really a lottery. I've been looking out for little clues about what they are going to be selecting in this team, but they're giving away very little All that has been said about is the redemption for New Zealand after that loss to England. They want to fire back, get themselves a big win over the Welsh here. But nonetheless, that is my Scott Robertson All Blacks lineup prediction. It is a slightly shorter video than normal, but it is so difficult to know whether or not, like I said, we're going to see what happened last year, how the All Blacks still go with a pretty similar looking lineup, or whether this is going to be the game that we see the experimentation. But then at the same time, you've got such a long window where they will not be playing rugby. So even if a young player does extremely well in this contest, are they going to be playing in July next year? Or is it just a one-off performance where they do get the chance? But nonetheless, do let me know who you think Scott Robertson will be selecting. The side is going to be announced at 9 p.m. on Thursday night New Zealand time, so we will be doing the video on the channel too. But thank you all very much for tuning in. If you did enjoy, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, and I will see you all for the next one.